Welcome back to the farmstead. We're glad you're here. In today's video, part 2, we sit down with Kamon Reynolds at his kitchen table and we get to learn a little bit more of who Kamon is. What was that aha moment when everything started to click? We also talk about the Hive Life Conference that him and his wife Laurel put together, what was going through their mind when they kind of crafted that whole thing and put that together, and where they want to see that go moving forward. Now keep an eye out on our website at naturesimagefarm.com. Coming soon, you'll be able to see this entire episode in podcast format on our podcast at the Contrary Beekeeper Show. We hope that you've enjoyed these videos with Kamon Reynolds. At what point do you recall having that aha moment or that tipping point to where you said, "Oh my gosh, okay, now this is starting to catch"?
It wasn't all in 1 year, but it was over probably a 2 or 3 year period where every year was like, "Oh, we have enough bees alive now. I don't have to buy bees. It's not what we want, but at least we have enough to work with. We can split and get back to where we were." And the following year, we had what we wanted, or really close, and then we actually gained ground, and we were selling nukes because we had too many, the more than we wanted, or we decided to grow. So it really is a combination of things, and again, it's just like anything else in life. It's a little complicated. It's not just one or two things, but getting those bees in the right place, giving them the opportunities to be successful, because nature is not always easy. 2019, we had 140 pounds. We were pulling honey off of some colonies. They were just so good that one of our yards averaged over 120 pounds per colony. It was just a phenomenal year. It was easy to keep bees, except for the fact they wanted to swarm a lot that year because they were filling the hives so fast. So there's always something, and especially the nukes that year wanted to plug out, and then the next year was terrible. So part of being a beekeeper is really paying attention to what nature's doing, understand what it's doing, and then addressing that so we can help our bees out, because nature can be really rough. About 1 out of 6 first-year swarms survive. So 5 out of 6 are toast. That's not good percentages. That's nature right there. And that data was taken back, as I mentioned in one of my videos, in the 70s, prior to Varroa and some of these new viruses and different things that have really impacted the bees, before small hive beetles. So we live in a time where there's more pests than ever. We have to do our due diligence, and we as beekeepers just have got to realize that this isn't going to be something we can get into and in the first year we're going to have success. But I do believe that we are seeing a change on the educational level through people either on YouTube or podcasts, more people on the internet speaking up, more people just getting involved. And I think it's gonna come down to not anybody famous or anything like that, but just a lot of individuals who I feel like are collaborating now because of the internet, and those right people finding each other. And I'm excited. I really feel like what it took me 10 years to do, somebody could do in 3 years. No problem.
That's an incredible thing to be able to pass on, to be that lighthouse to somebody, to pass on that torch, to be honest and open with. It's one thing, coming here and seeing your place, seeing all the things that you have going on is so incredibly awesome. But there's so many things that make that awesome, or where all the failures, all the things that no one's ever going to see, all the things that you've had to learn the hard way, that you're open and honest with, and you're sharing that with folks because it gives them a more honest and true baseline. We all live in a world where every single one of us, if we're actually honest with ourselves, we all operate with an amount of confirmation bias. I don't think you can argue that. No matter what. I did it when I was going down treatment free. I thought that was the only way to do it. Every other thing that was not the right way. It was this way, and it was going to work out. And to be honest, it was because of my confirmation bias. And I had put my own blinders on and my own set of lenses to where, even though it was right in front of me, and I replicated the same poor result year after year, I did the thing that people do. I blamed this and I blamed that. It wasn't until I blamed myself and took responsibility before it was almost like the blinders come off and you can almost see things in a more neutral way. it doesn't matter what it is. Things, as you develop and you grow, you still have to fight ego. You still have to fight pride. You still have to fight that confirmation bias, and you still work hard to try to look through things in a lens to where you're actually observing what it is that's in front of you in a way to where you're not so attached to it to where you say, if this isn't working, okay, I understand that. Now what do we do? And that's that's really difficult, I think, for beginning beekeepers to really get a grasp on. Some folks probably do that better than others, but it does seem like, your early starts were definitely contrary to how most kids grew up. My wife and I, we raised 7 kids. We homeschool. We live life in a more contrary way, not because we were intentionally trying to be contrarians, not that we're intentionally being hard-headed, although I am. Yep. We're taking our life in our own hands. We're taking responsibility for our life and those that we bring into this world. You're also one of those folks that have a similar story. You've lived a life that's contrary to the American dream. And yes, what's important is when there are folks like you in this world that aren't afraid to stand up, to speak out, to do what's right, it helps bring everyone, helps bring all these folks into that light where we can see things a little bit more clearly. And once we have that collaboration, there is those strength in numbers. Mm-hmm. Recently, one of my first interactions with you was through the Hive Life Conference. How in the world what was going through your mind to say, you know what I need to do? I need to do this my way. I need to do this contrary to what's going on. How in the world did the Hive Life Conference come to be? Because it has been a massive impact for a lot of us, where one door has opened after the other because you put yourself out there.
Well, we were really fortunate and have been, but I say fortunate too loosely. We all have bad things that happen in our life. It's just a matter of time before a vehicle breaks down. Something happens. Tree falls on the house. Things happen to everybody. Bad things happen. But I also believe opportunities happen to everybody as well. Just some of us don't put ourselves in place for those to get in the place to take advantage of them. But also, sometimes we don't take them because there's risk involved or different things like that. And let me tell you, I was sweating bullets with that conference. It was one of the craziest things that I've done, and that's quite something. And you talked about being a contrarian. It's important. If you don't want to live like everybody else, you don't want to be like everybody else because you're like, this is what, look at the average guys, he's doing, this is what's happening. Why is the world like this? Well, stop being the average guy.
Right.
Stop living like the average guy. Stop thinking like the average guy. Being an adult, I think, in a nutshell, and I'm going to probably get roasted for this because, everyone's got their own definition, but is living in a constant state of self-evaluation, because you are wrong a lot.
A lot.
I know I am. And it's just, Laura and I were talking about this the other day. We were talking about doing stuff in summer. Summer is obviously June and July and months like that. Well, it's not to some people in this world. Summer is the total opposite time.
Right.
To them, June and July is winter time. And I'm just like, that's got to be so weird, if to actually go visit a place like that and things are that opposite. So we live in this small little world of ours. So getting outside of our own headspace, constantly self-evaluating, and I'm going to get to the conference here in a second, I promise you. But that's one of the things that I really try to work on, because I am very flawed in a lot of ways, and without my wife, none of this would be possible. She sees the world and perceives things in ways that I cannot, and that makes me stronger because she saves me from myself, and also takes maybe a good idea and I have and makes it great. The conference was not my idea. I knew I wanted to do one, but I didn't think it was time. And between a good friend of mine and my wife, they said, you can do this. And I was like, well, I don't know if now's the time for that. We really don't have a lot of time. They're like, but I was like, it's not that I wouldn't mind doing it. Honestly, I just didn't want the extra work at the time, because I'm just so bogged down constantly with different things. I'm like, one more thing to think of and worry about. So we started thinking about the conference in November, and we did the conference January 8th and 9th. So it was, really went from zero to, hero or whatever in a very short period. And it actually went really well, but it was, the opportunities were there, and we just put a lot of just so many hours into it. And it wasn't just me. My job primarily with it was networking. That's one of the few natural skills that I have. I feel like that's another thing with self-evaluation, is realizing where your strengths are, but more importantly, where your weaknesses are. And I really am poor at certain things, but I'm pretty good at networking. I can run my mouth, and I can usually talk to people pretty good. And as long as I believe in what I'm selling, I can sell it. And I believe that, when we have vendors come out or sponsors for our experimental yard, when we say that we're going to be able, if they support us, that we're going to be able to, do right by them, we mean it. And I will do everything that I can. And so we started talking to a couple people. I didn't know if 50 people would show up. The YouTube channel helped out a lot. And I was very fortunate to have opportunities to bring Bob Benny, who's a great person. That was one of the things we wanted. We wanted people to show up, Kent Williams, Bob, who were great on stage, actually had practical real world experience, but also were real personable off the stage. And because we didn't want a conference just to have a conference, we wanted the conference where people, if they needed any information, they could get it here. Whether it was for first-year beekeepers or beekeepers who've been keeping bees longer than I have and are talking queen rearing, we wanted stuff that would actually help people. That was the only goal. And it worked out pretty good because we were able to get the right people. And it was a great experience for me. I learned a lot, got to meet a lot of people. We maxed out the capacity. It was at half capacity, so we couldn't have any more than what we had. But it went great. We could have a conference one day that has 1,000, 2,000 people. Yeah, I'm not saying we will, but if we did, it wouldn't be as precious as this one was.
What sparked you wanting to do it? Because you just don't wake up one day and say, hey, you know what I should do? I should put my rear end on the line, my reputation, and my pocketbook.
A lot of money involved, that's for sure. Well, Joel Salatin and I talked many years ago, back in 2008. He was a keynote speaker at the SOG conference, and I really like Joel. And his information, he's not into beekeeping, not that I'm aware of, but he's one of those speakers that even if you're a city slicker and you go listen to Joe Salatin, you're going to get into farming really quick.
It's highly motivational.
Highly motivational. You can farm.
Inspirational is probably a better word.
Yeah, inspirational, motivational, all that stuff. Sensational. The only thing about Joe Salatin that surprised me, it's kind of like when you listen to a guy on the radio. You hear this big voice and you think that there's this guy that's 6'4" or something like that, and then you meet him in real life and he's like 5'1" and about 400 pounds, and he's wearing Bermuda shorts and flip flops. That's just how we kind of do things. A lot of people kind of get that idea with me sometimes. They're like, wow, you're a lot shorter than I thought you were, Cam. I thought you were a lot bigger. YouTube, get the camera angle right. I get Laurel to kind of hunch down a little bit and make it look like I'm a little taller. But Joe Salatin, I thought he had a big, deep voice, and no, he's a little more high-strung. And but I absolutely left that conference and thinking, man, I'm going to do this as a living. Whether it's beekeeping or CSAs, I'm going to do this. Back in 2008 with a buddy of mine who was also a full-time entrepreneur in the CSA industry, growing farmers markets and whatnot. But Joel, when he got down, I was able to talk to him for a second, and I think he kind of laughed. He said, what would you like to do? I said, well, I'd like to farm, but I think I'd just as much love to be into doing what you're doing as education. And of course, he's like, oh, here's a young upstart that wants the fame before doing the actual physical.
I want the whole world.
That's right. Well, it's the whole young generation wants it now kind of stuff. And, there was probably a certain degree of that in there. We all have an ego to a degree, but
we do.
I wanted to, I've always loved learning, and I've always enjoyed talking to people about what I know. And so I thought that would be a lot of fun to network. I just like the networking side of it as much as anything. So, he kind of laughed that off, and I kind of felt a little bad after that. But if I ever meet Joel, I'm going to tell him.
Joel, if you're listening, Kamon told you so.
I told him so. But the only reason that came about because of the brutal work. I mean, just absolutely brutal years of just no vacations, no days off, just completely destroying your adrenals and even gut microflora and all kinds of stuff because you're just working too many days back to back, and not just like 8-hour days. We're like 12s on the nice side of things. And, I remember several weeks back to back in spring, that would just be 100 hours. And that was just me. And then Laurel was doing a bunch too, maybe more actually with the kids. And, so in order to get to that point, there's a lot of stuff you have to wade through. But so I began scheming about doing conferences back in those days. I always wanted to do something like that, but I never thought I would do it at 32. I thought it would be more like 50. And the YouTube channel helped facilitate that because it's great marketing. I mean, basically I can say, hey guys, I'm going to be here. And it's dangerous. It really is, because I could post something on there that is totally bogus on mic control or something like that, and people literally spend thousands of dollars and then lose their bees because it's a totally baseless claim that this works. And it scares the living daylights out of me, to be honest. But it is a powerful marketing tool. And so I can say, hey guys, I'm going to be here. If you like to come and have dinner or do this conference, or we're going to try this. It's easy to get the word out to the people, and the people that watch my channel and follow me obviously are more like-minded type people, because I'm pretty open about how I feel on most things. And so I kind of weed out the weirdos, unless I'm weird, and then I'm weeding out the normal.
I'm sitting across from you, so
well, networking, you have to deal with some people that aren't quite your cup of tea, or cup of coffee, however you want to put it. But But yeah, the conference was a ton of work. I mean, Laurel just for like a month and a half. We weren't, a lot of people do Christmas. We typically do. We didn't do Christmas hardly that year. Or last year. We just worked solid. And Laurel just did all the technical stuff. I was talking to vendors, talking to people, figuring this stuff out, caterers and stuff. And we didn't know if we were going to lose our shirt or not. Quickly, we found out that we were not, because enough people were going to show up. But I was really happy because I felt like the right people got to meet each other.
It was perfect timing, because while it would be easy for you to sit there, and it would be awesome for me to sit here and pat you on the back and say, this was a massive hit because of you, Kamon. Behind every good man's a better woman. I can say that for my wife, and I know you'll say that for yours too. But it also seems like we have found ourselves in a very special point in time where certain things are predestined or preordained to happen for reasons that we don't understand. But all we can do is step through that door and be that change that we want to see, be that person that facilitates that relationship, that reaches out to helps that person to shine that light. That's exactly what you did. And not only was it a success, the things that I heard people talking about walking through, meeting new people, is they've never seen anything like it. It was absolutely contrary to every other bee meeting, convention, or any large get-together when it came to beekeepers ever. Something very special happened, and a lot of special people were involved in it.
Well, I built the conference based off of what I hated on ones I've been to. That's basically the skeleton that we used to build a conference, and what would we like in a conference. And I think it worked out pretty good, just because, the type of people that follow me on YouTube, typically, and most beekeepers, they don't want, science is great. We need it. It's an important part of beekeeping. We need research and all that kind of stuff, but sitting through hours of graphs and charts and stuff, most people like myself, that's not what we go to conferences for. Right. We go there because we want to talk to other beekeepers and learn more about their experiences. We also want to leave that conference with more tools to keep our bees alive. And that's basically the whole reason that I would go to one, is I want to go there to become a better beekeeper. I'm going there to become better. And if you leave there and you feel like you don't know any more than you had before, then that was a lot of money and time. And, there's some people go for the trade show or just to see buddies, but we try to kind of piece all that together where you went and you got to learn from people who really could give you good information. And we also wanted to have a time for people to network with each other. We also try to make sure there was good deals for beekeepers there to where they could save a little bit of money on stuff that they might not be able to get elsewhere. And we're working on this year conference to do even better with that. Giving people opportunities, and kind of like you said, it's a trickle effect, or a domino effect. And opportunities, you've got to just go after them. One opportunity leads to another. It's really a domino effect with opportunities, but if you don't take those, and sometimes they don't pan out as much as you would like, but it's funny how some of those opportunities that I felt like, that didn't really work out, years later actually fall into place. And with the conference, we could have gotten shut down. We had no idea what was going to happen with that. We were playing it by ear.
It was a really tricky time.
It was
Folks
a tricky
listening
time.
now, it's easy to forget how we've all progressed through this pandemic and such, but it was a very specific point in time where a lot of people were yearning for that human connection to also learn to move their beekeeping in a new direction at the same time, where it feels like there were some things happening and moving in the beekeeping industry that all kind of combined and apexed at the time when you put that in place, and that was huge.
Well, and the timing was good. Everyone has their opinions on how things should be. I personally believe in freedom first and foremost of the individual, and that goes to the beekeeping, that goes to everything. And Tennessee obviously feels the same way. I mean, we did everything by the legal. Right. Everything that Tennessee asked of us, the state of Tennessee, we did it. And if they were going to say you can't do this, we would have not done it. And so thankfully it worked out. And I had several people like, you shouldn't do this right now because it'll probably get shut down. I'm like, and then you'll lose your deposit on all this stuff. And that was the risk that we took. I'm like, if we don't take it, then obviously it'll have failed before we've even started. My grandpa, who was one of the most inspirational people in my life and just a great person, he said a couple things as kids, and we'd hear it hundreds of times. And as you get to be an adult, it sinks in. And that's why it's so important to say these to your kids. But he'd say, Kamon, have you ever heard of Oliver Twittleby?
Who?
Exactly.
Never heard of him.
That's because he gave up. That's because he quit. That's what he'd say. That's because he quit. So that's why you've never heard of him. And also can't, never could. Little things like that. And it is my philosophy that I would rather fail trying than just to never try. And so that's what happens with the conference. It worked out. It was great, and it's been a big deal for us, and I think a lot of other people. It's been a big deal for me. I've been able to network now with so many different places, and it's going to be a hub, if I have my way, for great information and great networking, and that's so vital. As an individual, just think, if someone gave you a beehive and said, okay, here it is, you're closed off from the world.
Oh, man.
You have no information. You've got to start from scratch and figure this out. You would spend your entire life trying to figure out what I can do in a year of networking. Seriously. I mean, if I can get a hold of the right people, learning from guys like Bob Benny, Ian Stepler, some of these old books that are still really valid, Walter T. Kelly's book, Eugene Killian's book, G.M. Doolittle, Jay Smith, so many of these valuable old bee books, and all these are very successful beekeepers. You can learn so much in a short amount of time, and we've got to realize that. That's why grandpas and parents, good ones, are so vital to children, and whether we realize it or not at the time, is we can learn life lessons that can take us years to learn ourselves, or we can learn it just watching our parents or them explaining it to us. And as beekeepers, we've got to do the same. We've got to find those people who are good, those good beekeepers who are successful, who not just say that they are or have a YouTube channel, because you got to watch those YouTubers. But
especially from Tennessee.
You do. Well, in Tennessee, we do a lot of crazy things. A lot of crazy things. And I think it's a great state. But we aren't always the best beekeepers. And I see a lot of change happening in Tennessee, positive change. But we have got to constantly look and move forward and spend a lot of time. If you're a new beekeeper listening to this, spend a lot of time sourcing your information. Reconfirm and then confirm again.
That's the huge thing.
That the person you're learning from actually is good. There's so many people who are popular who are terrible at keeping bees alive. You don't have to be famous. You don't have to be good at bees to be famous. And there are a lot of people who nobody's ever heard of. One of them is a speaker at our conference January 7th and 8th in 2022. Most people have never heard of. And we'll tell you about him later. But he keeps about 400 colonies by himself and has been a full-time beekeeper for, I think, almost as long as I've been alive. And so we need to learn from guys like that. I mean, obviously, to even just let alone manage that many colonies, but to keep them alive and run a business, that's a lot. And some people are like, I don't want to run a business. I just want to be a hobby beekeeper. Well, to keep bees healthy and sustainable, you have to treat it like a business. Honeybees keep their hives like a business. And, some people don't like that, but that's just the way that it is. And healthy bees make great crops of honey. Healthy bees make a lot of splits. Healthy bees survive. And that comes from being productive. So as beekeepers, we got to take a lesson from the bees there. We also need to take lessons from those who are really knowledgeable and can prove that they are successful. I just think that that's so important. And that's why I'm so excited, is because I'm seeing so many of those people pick up the torch and just lead the way for, I'm learning stuff from these guys. You're only one person, and we've got to work together. I mean, you look at a hive of bees, one bee is worthless. It can't hardly do much in the context of being alone. But as a unit, a strong, healthy colony is extremely powerful. I mean, they do things that we still can't figure everything out. So definitely collaboration, networking is very important. And whenever I started doing more of that is when I started having more success, because I was starting to do things that was outside of, my own mind. I was just reading books and doing things in my own bee yards and trying to learn from that. And it was just taking me years and years to do what, again, I feel like now if people are learning from the right people, and those right people, I believe, are guys like Bob Benny, Ian Stepler. There's several people on YouTube. I've seen a lot of stuff that you've done that has been very useful to, especially the video with the buckets. I learned a lot of stuff about buckets. I had no clue that there was so much detail into bucket feeding. I may have never known that had, I not learned that from you. So, I mean, different sources all working together. We literally, I think, can, through collaboration, put ourselves decades forward. And we must do it if we are to get the beekeeping industry where it needs to be. And we're going to.
There's, it's cliche to say, but there is something to be said about the phrase that a rising tide raises all ships. It really is an important thing to kind of keep in the back of your mind, where you can certainly lone wolf it, and you can go on and you think that it's your way or the highway, that you have all the secrets to beekeeping. But in the grand scheme of things, you're only hurting yourself, and you're also hurting the folks that you're influencing, because then it puts them into a place where they're not open-minded to learning from anybody else. The fact of the matter is, we are all learning. If we're not all learning from each other, we're not going to get anywhere with our beekeeping. And if we're okay with that, if we're okay with constantly stumbling over ourselves or our thinking, then that's fine. But there is something to be said for the man that spends his life learning until the day he dies. And then maybe that's where the learning really even begins. But if we close our minds off to where we're not able to, not only, if I wouldn't look to see, what is Bob doing about this? What is Ian doing about this? How does Kamon do this? We're talking about Georgia, Tennessee, Canada, whatever part of the world that's in. It's somewhere around there where there's ice. Is that Greenland or Iceland somewhere?
I don't know,
They have Tim Hortons coffee there.
That's the only warm thing up there.
I was going to ask Ian. I think I asked him on a live chat. I really can't figure out, does he live right next door to Tim Hortons, or is Tim Hortons actually sponsor Ian Stepler? Because every time I see that rascal, he's got a fresh Tim Hortons cup and he's sipping off it like he's got a fresh piping hot cup of Timmy's coffee there.
Well, if they don't sponsor him, they should. But in all seriousness, I think that the reason Ian has to work so hard is because he blows so much of it on that stuff. He just spends so much money on coffee, and he constantly has to get out there and work because it's just that expensive coffee probably. But
maybe we need to have a Tim Hortons intervention. There's probably another good cup of coffee out there.
He's beyond saving, I think, at this point.
Our powers.
Yeah, well, there's certain hives that get to a point where we just shake them out or just leave them to their own devices, drop some formic in there, and he's kind of at that point of just focus on something that can be actually dealt with.
All kidding aside, he is one of the most down to earth and humble teachers I think that I've even seen. He has a certain way of going about it to where he engages with folks that have one hive or 1,000 hives, and he's willing to give his time, share his knowledge. And I think it just feels like we're at it, like you mentioned, we're in a place to where there's a tipping point, and it feels like it is happening. And maybe everyone says that at some point in their journey.
I don't think so.
I think maybe they right now feels different.
But I feel like it is different, and I keep thinking that it's just me, but more and more people are saying that, and people that are smarter than me.
And taller.
And well, I would hope they are taller than me if they're male. Otherwise, they're pretty darn short. But no, seriously, though, Ian is a great guy, and I would consider him one of the first people on YouTube that actually grabbed the bull by the horns on this education through visuals.
Right.
That actually really lived up to what he said on an elite level, but also in a humble way that anybody could get something from it. And he's very personable. He's coming to my conference as long as nothing crazy happens in 2022. So I'm excited to meet him. I consider him a good friend, and he's been really helpful to me. There's been a couple times where the decisions that we're making right now really impact. I mean, I can't say enough about Ian and Bob. We're at a point in our business where I'm full time, and the decisions that we make can cost us thousands of dollars, or just put a lot of stress on us. That's one of the hard things again about being an adult, or especially running a business, is that being responsible and having kids and making those hard choices. Like, if I do this right, it could be good for my family, but it's a little bit of a risk. Do I stay where I'm at? Do I try something different? And what if I take the wrong path? Is this going to just completely derail this year? And am I back to driving a semi truck? There's a lot of stuff to that. And there's some of the things where I'm just second guessing myself. I think that I know what I'm talking about, but I'm not sure. And I can just hey, Ian, or hey, Bob, that's like I talk to him all the time. But when I really need to, I can. And there's been several times where they just kind of reconfirm or just throw a little bit of a different angle on it, and actually can give experience instead of my idea, or give me context. And man, to them, it's just like nothing, because they are
gracious.
They are gracious, and they're also that skilled. But to me, I mean, it impacts my family. It also takes a lot of stress off of me. So, again, that paradigm shift is happening, and the wave is forming. It's just starting to form. So people need to grab their surfboards and either learn how to surf or body surf or whatever it takes. Ride that wave, because it's going to be fun. And there's some people that are a little frustrated by the wave, but that's the way it always works. There's always somebody that's trying to throw an anchor into that nice little surf. But all analogies aside, I've never been this excited for beekeepers. I really feel like the tools are opening up and available, where a lot of things have been behind closed doors. And we're working hard. People have enabled me to be able to spend more time focusing on education for myself and them. And I take it seriously. This experimental yard, it is my number one focus this year outside of my family. And the only way I've been able to do that is because of so much support from these individual people on YouTube and the sponsors as well. And because of that, I have the time and the assets to be able to figure out better controls. And I think we're going to get somewhere, because it's going to go right. The money's going to go right where it needs to go, into the nuts and bolts of the main problem we have, and that's Varroa, and controlling them. And long term, maybe we get into resistant bees. I think there is something there. I think, again, kind of that balancing act of not being closed-minded in either way, open-minded within reason. And we need beekeepers who are pushing the envelope on better bees and resistant bees. But it can't be they're my bees, so they're better. They've got to actually live up to the hype. And I think there are beekeepers out there who have better bees like that. But isolating them through all of the smoke and mirrors with so many of these people who sell bees out there, it's hard, especially if you're a new beekeeper. And people need to be more open and honest about products and bees and stuff like that. I think, bludgeoning people verbally is, you shouldn't do that. But I think we're bad sometimes about, I don't want to be one of those guys. But we need to, if someone's got a bad product, we don't need necessarily tear into them, but we need to share that information. If they have bad bees or they give us bad service, we need to let other people know, and everyone needs to be held accountable. I think that's important. I think in beekeeping, we have not done a good job of that. I think that type of competition is going to force the equipment and the bee quality in the direction it needs to go for the consumer.
That's another issue with the current mindset, is a lot of folks are living in a scarcity mindset where they're literally grabbing and gnashing at the teeth for every opportunity, where it seems like all the folks that I meet or that are making connections with that are successful, not only in beekeeping, but are successful in raising a family or living life, or they're doing it in a certain way to where it's a mind of abundance. They're living life that they're not only can you see that they're living a life that's blessed, but they are giving to others. They're giving of their time. Bob Benny mentioned it last time that we got together. There's plenty of room for everyone at the table. Yes. We don't need to arm wrestle over every opportunity that comes away, because like you mentioned earlier, sometimes that opportunity opens up as a door and you walk through there and you're looking around and you don't see anything. Well, that's just because you haven't taken the time to look, that there is one more door that you just have to go walk to. Now, it might take you a little time to get there. The thing about it is, Bob says that I think you would agree, beekeeping is kind of summed up for him in one word, and that's tenacity. You mentioned that earlier. You have to be constantly digging in, not be afraid to make those mistakes, but also to be humble enough and open-minded enough to know when it is indeed you causing the problem. Where do you look for answers? How do you move this forward? And that's why right now is so important with the things that you're doing. All the guys that we spoke with earlier, there are resources. There are people out there that actually want to see you well. They're not going to set you up to fail. They're going to reach out. They're going to be that lighthouse. They're going to help everyone along. And those folks are the ones that stand out on their own. Those are the folks that stand out without having to badmouth anybody else. Those are the guys that stand up. Those are the ones that are actually making that positive change, that are making the difference and are part of this movement or this direction that we feel that we're that we're heading in. There's guys like you and myself and everyone listening. I would think if they're probably in tune with a similar thing, is we're not only trying to we're not only trying to keep our bees alive and keep our apiaries in the black and trying to grow our businesses. We're actually trying to lay out the foundation for our kids, for our grandkids. There's an ancient Greek proverb that a society grows great when old men plant trees under the shade they know that they'll never sit under. And I think if a lot of us had that mentality to where we're not just constantly trying to rake in the coins, we're trying to lay the groundwork out for the next generation, for the next person who needs help.
You have to. You have to do that if you want things to go forward. And I think beekeepers, again, have been the worst enemies. By not collaborating, by not championing, by not taking hold of what is going on and giving that up to whether it's entities or whether that's to researchers. Again, we need those type of people, but I feel like we have left the education by and large to those who are outside of the boots on the ground beekeeping. I know some great beekeepers that have PhDs. I know some wonderful researchers in the beekeeping industry that we must continue to have, but I feel like the beekeepers haven't held up their end in a lot of areas. And it's all fine and dandy to have research, but you have to have those people who are boots on the ground beekeepers who actually live it. And again, I mean, I love books. I read them constantly when I was getting into bees, and they are nothing in comparison to the experience that you can get from someone who can do it. We have got to take hold of the education of this industry, and we've got to not only do the education, but we've also got to push for the products that we need and the things that we want. I think the beekeepers working together, the sky's the limit, and that's the reason why we've had issues is we have not been good about taking the bull by the horns. So one of the things that popped into my mind for a weird reason was a story of when I was getting into beekeeping shortly after. I was catching a lot of swarms because I wanted good genetics, right? One of those treatment-free genetics, and obviously these bees didn't last long enough to do anything special. But there was and still is, a huge building in Granville, Tennessee. It's like was an old bank. They got a wonderful historic place over there. And there's been a swarm up there, or a hive of bees, constantly. And there have been people that I've talked to that are like 90 years old that can remember bees being up in there in like the 60s and stuff like that. But it's behind a bunch of brick and stuff. It's way up there. And you can just see the bees working, and they have a bluegrass festival there every year. So I was playing a bluegrass show that day, and I knew they were up there, but they were just too high to get to, and no one wanted to beat up that beautiful old bank in order to get to them. And I told Laurel and a couple of my bluegrass buddies who thought I was crazy that, those bees are going to swarm. Well, sure enough, right after our first 45-minute set, they swarmed. I mean, there was a cloud of bees.
That's awesome.
Oh, well, I mean, and there's like 1,000 people at this event. Probably, there's more than that, but at least there's 1,000 people there right then in that one area. And they're scattered around doing different things, but there was like a 25-foot globe of size of bees just circling around just barely over the top of people's heads.
That's cool.
Nobody noticed. Hardly anybody noticed that it was happening. I couldn't believe it. I thought there would be widespread panic. I mean, literally, the swarm must have been at least 20,000 bees. It was massive.
Wow.
And, so we're talking probably 6-7 pounds of bees. And they're just going right over everybody's heads. And, of course, I'm just like, oh, my goodness, I don't have my bee suit on, any of this stuff. But swarms are usually gentle, right? Because a lot of swarms are extremely gentle.
Every YouTube video says that. It must be true.
Well, a bunch of bums. Most of the time they're right. Swarms typically are very gentle. But this one landed, usually swarms light somewhere pretty close and they take off eventually for another location. It dropped about 15 feet away initially after circling around for a while over everybody's heads. And I'm looking around for a box, anything I can put them in. And it lights down on this bush, and I asked the lady who owned that little property next to the bank, and she was the one that was like 92 or something like that. And she's like, oh yeah, there's been bees there since the 60s. I remember, seeing bees up there. But a lot of people think that, oh man, those are special bees. They've lasted that long. No, what that was a perfect swarm trap. They probably died every other year.
Right.
But literally good locations can fill up with the swarm from somewhere else.
Smells good, feels good. There might be something left for them to eat.
I'd say if it had been in there since the 60s, it's probably died at least every other year.
And even though there wasn't a colony, there might have been other scouts or robbers that were going and visiting it and cleaning up, so it might always look like traffic.
Yeah, well, I mean, exactly. I just think that, as a prime swarm trap, basically, the perfect swarm trap. And so, anyways, these bees, I asked her, can I have them? She's like, sure. Well, someone had called a beekeeper, so somebody did notice. I got them in a box, and they were not gentle at all. I didn't have a veil or anything. I shook him down in there. Keep in mind, I have another set to play in about 10 minutes, another 45-minute set. I shake him in that box, and within about 5 seconds, I've been stung about 18 times. No suit, nothing. And I was just getting bludgeoned. Got a little video clip of it. I need to see if I can find it. So, long story short, I got those bees. They wore me out. They weren't special or treatment free or anything like that, but it was an interesting story. And there was another beekeeper that showed up that tried to swipe them from me after I'd already put them in a box. And he's like, "Hey, we got this call. Those are our bees." I said, "You see all these stings on me?" I did that without a bee suit. I said, had I not got those stings, maybe I'd give them up to you, but no, those are mine. He still
earned them.
He tried to still get them from me, like literally take the box from me. And I'm like, we played a bluegrass show. My hands were swollen up.
Oh, man.
It actually worked out pretty good. My buddies were like, "We're not taking those home in this car." So we had to get a different vehicle. It actually worked out, but you got to be careful with those bees, and you never know when they're going to be aggressive and stuff like that. I just thought that was a really interesting story because, excuse me, I just saw a post the other day on Facebook. "Oh, these bees have been in here for 30 years straight. Resistant bees. Oh, resistant bees. I'm going to get those genetics." It's not how it works. Even before Varroa, it's not how it worked.
It's interesting because we all, I think, have to, if we all arrived to where we think we want to be, we want to say it would take the fun out of it, but we wouldn't grow as a person, as an individual, or even collectively if we all just poof, we end up being a successful beekeeper. It's definitely if you start off to be a beekeeper and all you want to do is become a successful beekeeper, it might be a challenging way to look at it. But if you look at it as to where you are definitely open and available to fail, and you're willing to dig in and work through it, do the work, reach out to others for help. I mean, I think you really can start to get a little bit of momentum and put yourself in a place to where maybe that is where you want to go. Some of us even find out that as we go down this path, what we initially thought we wanted to do, who we work with, the type of bees, the entire approach can also massively change. And so if we let ourselves be open to that as it kind of makes itself known to us, then there's literally limitless opportunities. But if we off the cut say we are only going to have treatment-free bees, and if we can't keep them alive, then we're not going to keep bees, well, a lot of us would never kept going.
Yeah. Well, again, I think that there is better opportunity than there has been since I've been into beekeeping for people to get some ground speed right out of the gate and start good. You're going to fail. It's part of it. People fail with chickens and stuff too, so you will with bees, and that's those lessons are important.
Which are crazier, bee people or chicken people?
Well, a lot of them were chicken people or still are chicken people.
That's
Chickens
true.
is like a gateway drug for
It is a
beekeeping.
gateway.
So,
That's true.
Beekeepers are kind of an odd bunch, but I really like them. Those that stick around with it, and especially those who really put the work into it. Just a lot of respect for them. They're a lot of fun to be around. Bees are a lot of fun to be around. So my greatest fear in life, and I've said this before, is boredom. You don't get that with bees.
No.
So that's one of the reasons why I'm a beekeeper. It's like this spring. I mean, this is my 18th spring or whatever it is going into with bees, and I'm as excited. I think I'm more excited this year than I was in my first year, and that's saying something. I absolutely love it. But things are getting a little bit more efficient for me, and we're getting back to fun. There were several years where, the fun was gone. You have to be careful starting a business. You can ruin beekeeping, turning it into a job. I recommend, get 5 or whatever your number is, 3 hives, whatever. Be sustainable with it. Be successful. And then grow as you can grow the operation. I'm really not a huge fan. I wish I could go back and say this to myself and change my mind, though I probably wouldn't have listened. And would have just done just that. I would have been years ahead. But yeah, the bees can take care of themselves as far as growing the operation if you keep them the way that they need to be kept. And it is totally a coexistence, I really believe, between human and bee. We can give them the best life that they can ask for if we know what we're doing. I truly believe that. Nature is pretty brutal. I don't want my bees to suffer. I don't want my bees to die. I'm definitely not getting the losses of only 1 out of 6 first-year swarms survive like in nature. I'm low side getting 5 out of 6 to survive. And then if you count all the splits I make throughout the year and sell, I'm actually gaining ground every year. So it's hard to argue, a point that, you're killing the bees or you're weakening the genetics because, you're propping them up with feeding them, or you're propping them up with treating them, or whatever. Well, the bees seem to like it pretty good because they respond really well. I just think for new beekeepers, just be willing to learn. I definitely can't say anything about, as far as like people ask me, should I do treatment free? I give them my recommendation, which is no. Obviously, I can't teach that. I can't do it. But people obviously have the freedom to decide. I think that they should. I think if in a perfect world in Kamon's perfect world of how should I start off, you're going to read a couple old books like Walter T. Kelly's How to Keep Bees and Sell Honey, Good Nuts and Bolts book. You're going to listen to Bob Benny. You may listen to my channel a little bit for some in-between stuff. You're going to follow people who you can see keep their bees and don't buy bees, because that's what you want to do. You want to keep your bees alive, and you want to treat them, and you want to keep them healthy. And then once you get to that point where, oh, wow, this is my 2nd year or my 3rd year, and I've produced honey, or I've produced more splits, if that's your thing. Some people don't care about honey. They just want to produce more bees. Or some people just want to keep their bees alive just so they can have pollination. Maybe just a little bit of this or that. Whatever it is. Beeswax, and people love that. Whatever your definition of success is, you have to have alive bees to do that. Getting to that point where you have those healthy bees coming out of winter, and you can do it in a couple of years. Now you know how to repeat that. You've done it a couple times. Then if you want to start going into a little bit more natural side of things, knock yourself out. We need people who are going to push these boundaries. You have to have people that push the boundaries. But at the same time, you can't. I tried to reinvent the wheel when I first got into beekeeping. All these professionals were saying, you can't do this. You can't do this. I'm like, well, I'm going to do it. Well, you know why they said that you can't do this? Because they had tried, and it hadn't worked for them. And life is complicated, and it's hard when you're a teenager to always listen to that older person advice, because obviously you've lived longer and you know better. As a teenager, we're bad about that. That's why teenagers kind of get made fun of a little bit by adults, because all of us were teenagers at one point.
Right.
But the difference is, at 32, I look at the world from a totally different viewpoint, and it has totally changed my beekeeping. Again, all it takes is 1 or 2 years of success, and most beekeepers stay into it indefinitely.
Keep building on that. One thing that you do with your channel, or in guys like Ian and Bob, is they don't say, you can't do that, so don't do it. What a lot of guys are good at saying is, I can't do it, and here's why. Because then you can take that back to your context, try to figure out why, first and foremost, why do I want to have bees? And then start to get a rough outline of the context in which you want to do that. That's going to help you gravitate towards the folks that can help you along that journey. Your YouTube channel, for instance, you do a live chat every week.
Oh, maybe twice a month.
And what I always thought was incredible about that is you are literally fielding, it seems like, hundreds of questions. and you're taking the time out for folks and answering the questions that you know, questions that you've answered a million times before, but you're still engaging and putting that effort out. And I know a lot of folks appreciate that. When we put the word out that we were going to be sitting down with you, of course, we had some listener questions.
Hey, can you help us out? Hit like, subscribe, share with all your friends, and be sure to check these great videos out too.